We're going to look at Psalms 21. Again, another kingly psalm. And I do like the idea that these psalms seem to come from different perspectives. You know, you'll get something that's very pastoral, something that's very kingly, something that's in want, something that's in joy. There's always an emotive going on. And just like in our lives, there's always something going on. The kings of joy in thy strength, O Lord, and in thy salvations, how greatly shall he rejoice. So this is the idea of the king is rejoicing in the Lord. Thou hast given him his heart's desire, and hast not withholding the quest of his lips. Thou hast preventest him with blessings of goodness, and thou settest a crown of pure gold on his head. The idea that he is exalting the king. Get the idea that God exalts those who exalts him. And the idea that the king should be exalting God. And a king will either exalt God and do good for the people, or a king will exalt himself and do evil for the people. You never find that a self-exalting God does anything good for the people. And he talks about how thine hand shall, talking about God, so for the king trusteth in the Lord, and through the mercy of the Most High he shall not be moved, and the he there is the king shall not be moved. Thine hand shall find out all thine enemies, thy right hand shall find out those that hate thee. The idea of the right hand, the idea of, we saw that earlier when Benjamin was called the son of the right hand. You've heard the term a right-hand man. This is the guy who gets things done for you. If you need something done, he's the one that goes taking care of it. Jesus was the right-hand man of God. Even though he is God, he's also at the right hand. He was doing things for God. He was here doing the things of God, and he was saying things of God. And he talks about, they shall make them as a fiery oven in the time of thine anger, and the Lord shall swallow them up in his wrath, and the fire shall devour them. Their fruit shall thou destroy from the earth, and their seed from among the children. We see a lot of also violence and wrath against the enemies of God. Just because we don't see this in today's dispensation, where we sit in grace, where God is willing to hold back and work with men. He's willing to wait upon men. He's willing to talk with men. But there'll be a time when all that talking will stop and his wrath will fall. This happened to Israel twice. It happened with the Assyrians, and then 70 years later or so, it happened with Judah, that he brought in these large nations for the wrath of God falling down. And except he hadn't left a remnant, which came to be the Jews at the time of Christ, there would have been none saved. And he only saved that remnant, again, because of the promises he made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then through Judah. So these promises are what keeps God from destroying Israel completely, because Israel was no better than the nations around them, and sometimes they did even worse. They even did more than the evil nations that were around them. But God remembers his promises. And it says in 13, be thou exalted in thine own strength, for we will sing and praise thy power. Again, the king is not seeing that I've done this of my own power, but this is in the power of God. So it's a very strong kingly psalm, and it shows giving glory to God and how God will have his wrath come down on the sinners who have rejected him. When we go back to the story of Joseph, once again, a well-known story. Yesterday, we were talking about how that Joseph had gone into prison, and that he had met a butler and a baker, and they had had dreams, and he had interpreted these dreams. The butler, through his dream, was being told that he would be lifted back to his stature, to his station. The baker would be hanged. And that's exactly what happened. It was on the Pharaoh's birthday that he lifted up one and killed the other. And the butler went back to his service, but he forgot about Joseph. Joseph even said, remember me in this place. Now, there's nothing wrong with a Christian trying to get out of their situation. Yesterday I was talking about sometimes we feel like we're in prisons of our finances and prisons of different things. You can try to get out of the situation, please do. But don't make your escape your goal. That's the problem. Sometimes in Christians, we make the escape from our problems our goal, because when you get out, there's just more problems. Handling the problems, to serve God in whichever situation you're in. So it was after 2 full years, the Pharaoh dreamed, and he had a dream. He saw 7 favored kine. He saw 7 favored cows, and behold, 7 others came up that were ill-favored. and the ill-favored ate up the 7 favored cows, and he awoke from his dream. He slept. I don't know if it was the same night or another night, but he slept and he dreamed the second time, and there were 7 ears of corn, and the stalks came up, and they were golden and beautiful and ripe. 7 more came up, devoured those 7. And Pharaoh awoke, and he had this dream. And he was very disturbed by these dreams. These dreams were powerful and emotive, and he wanted to know what was it about. So he asked his magicians, he asked, his priest, and none of them could interpret the dream. The butler remembers about Joseph, because Pharaoh was wrought, angry with his servants, and then he was telling that you were angry with me, and you put me in a ward, and I met this guy who can interpret dreams. So Pharaoh sends for Joseph and calls for them hastily. You get the idea that when Pharaoh was wanting to see Joseph, he didn't mean tomorrow, he meant now. And when God sometimes is ready to move in someone's life, it's now. You've got to be ready. You've got to be ready to move. You need to keep yourself primed so that if God does move you out of your situation, you're ready to go. So he sent for him hastily, and Joseph took the time to shave himself, clean up. You want to go in respectfully. He changed his raiment. He just didn't go walking in as he was. And sometimes we need to remember that God's timing is good. If an opportunity comes along, handle it respectively. Don't just run out. Show some respect to the situation. And Pharaoh told him to Joseph. And Joseph gives glory to God. This is interesting. He goes, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace." God will be answering you in peace. So Pharaoh tells him the dream of the 7 cows, then the 7 bad cows. 7 good cows, 7 bad cows. Then 7 good coins, 7 bad coins. And of course, Joseph tells them the dreams are the same. That there's going to be 7 good years where everything's great. You're going to have abundance, but there's going to be 7 bad years of famine coming along. And the 7 bad years will be so bad they'll wipe out the goodness of the 7 good years. And the dream was told him twice because it's this thing established by God. Now, sometimes there's a scripture that's out of 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established. Usually that's a pretty good litmus test. One dream, one circumstance might not be from God. You have to analyze it. But if you're having 2 or 3 coming at you, then maybe you need to give it some extra thought. So God established this thing, and Pharaoh looked at him, and he goes, "Here's what I tell you to do, Pharaoh. Go find a guy that you trust, put him over your land, start saving extra of what you're getting, and appoint officers to take a 5th part of the land." So you're taking 20% of the increase and putting away. So for 7 years, you're taking 20% of everything you got and shoving it away for that rainy day. And so he had more than enough to get them and the nations around them through this 7-year cycle that was coming. And put this food up in stores so that when the famine comes, Egypt, that the land will not perish through the famine. And Pharaoh thought this was a good idea. And he says, "Can such as one we find better than this man? Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? For insomuch as God has shown me these things, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my household and over all of my people, and you'll be second only to me." And he even gives him a wife, and through those wives he has 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. But all of a sudden he goes from this to this. He goes from down to now you're ruling everything except under the Pharaoh. So he took off his ring, which was a signet ring that was a promissory note. He took it off so that now you can use this ring to get the goods you need. It's like giving him a checkbook or a credit card. And if you establish something and you put wax on it and seal it with this ring, it is done. So it gives him authority. So Joseph takes this authority and he becomes second in the land. And he changes his name, gives him a wife. Now Joseph was 30 years old. So we're looking at a timeline here. He's 30 years old when this happens. He had been in jail for 2 years. So that means he was 28 when he went in jail. He was sold into slavery sometimes after 17. He might have been 18 or so. We know he was 17 when he told them about the dreams. We don't know how long a period of time it was between the dreams and when they were selling them. So he could have been 18, 19. We're looking at about a decade. in which here he was, sold to Potiphar. He was in Potiphar's house, and then he's off to jail. So we get the idea that he wasn't in Potiphar's house just 2 to 3 months, and this was an ongoing thing. So again, looking at the timeline, it's interesting. He's a 30-year-old man. Now he's running the show, except for Pharaoh, and his goal is for the salvation, if you will, of Canaan and of Egypt and of the surrounding nations. So he's got a big job. So he starts saving up 1/5, 20%, of the plentiful years, and he brings them in. He gathers all the foods for the 7 years that are in Egypt and laid them in storage, the food that was in the field. And he gathered up corn as the sands of the sea, as much was left, numbering was without number. There was no way to number how much corn he had sitting aside, waiting for this to happen. And he has 2 sons, Manasseh, for God hath made me forget all my toil in my father's house. He has Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful. So, Manasseh means to forget my toil, and Ephraim means fruitful. So these names have something. And again, they're very messianic, because Jesus has come for us that we might forget our toil that we've done, and now that we might be fruitful. So again, each one of these names has a meaning, a messianic meaning, as we will see later on in the character of Christ. So the 7 years of plenteous had gone by, and now there were 7 years of dearth were coming. And Joseph had said, the dearth is on all the lands, but in the land of Egypt there is bread. And all the land of Egypt was famished, and the people cried to Pharaoh, go unto Joseph, and what he says, do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. The entire earth was now in famine. Joseph opened up the storehouses and sold. Now, the interesting thing here, he didn't give it away. He wasn't a socialist. He didn't just say, here's free stuff. He sold it. He got money back for it. He was, he was it was part of the economic trade. So people had money, they had resources, they had houses, they had stuff. He wasn't stealing from them. It was an honest price. But here he was selling that, and he sold to the nations around them, and all the countries into Egypt came to buy corn, for the famine was sore. Now, some people would say, well, why is God allowing this famine to happen? Is this climate change or something like that? We get the idea that the earth, after the fall, goes through cycles. And this is just the way things go now. There's cycles of warm, there's cycles of cold, there's cycles of plenty, there's cycles of without. And we see this when we live longer. We go look through the decades even and see cycles of plenty, cycles. And this is economic. Nations will rise just to a certain point, then they'll start having problems. Then they'll have to pull themselves back up. We'll see this with the weather. We'll see this with crops. So it's a part of the cycle. And when you learn about this cycle, instead of fighting against it or trying to change it, God has a way to work within the cycles that are going on. Life has cycles. People go through cycles of struggling with finances and cycles to where they have an abundance, and it seems to go back and forth. In 42, this is where he meets his brothers. This is interesting. I love this. They come in to buy corn because there's no food in Canaan. So Jacob sends the boys, except for Benjamin. He holds Benjamin back. He sends the boys down to buy from Egypt. He's really protective of Benjamin. Benjamin is the last son of Rachel, and he's really keeping him close. So he sends them down, and Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. And again, through this whole interchange, he speaks through interpreters. He's kind of distant. Of course, he would look differently. He might have been wearing the headdress. He's also probably really tanned from being down in that area. And of course, he may have put on weight. He may have had a beard. There's several things that would come up without him creating a costume. He recognizes his brothers, and he says that they're spies. He says, you're not here to buy from me, you're spies. They say, no, we're not spies. You're spies. You came to see the nakedness of the land. And they start telling that they're servants of 12 brethren, the sons of one man. Behold, the youngest is home, and one is not, one has died. And Joseph says, you're spies. So he puts them in jail for 3 days. And then after that, he comes and gets them out and says, this do and live, for I fear God. If you are true men, let one of your brethren be bound in this house, and go and take Take corn for the famine with you, but bring me your youngest brother. Bring me the youngest brother so I'll know that what you're telling me is true. Now, this is going to be a big problem with Jacob. You know, he's not going to want to let Benjamin go. So, Reuben was trying to explain to him that would be a problem. But he says that's what he needs to do. And Joseph commands and fills their sacks with coin and puts their money in the front of the sacks, right up at the top. And so they go off their way. They get down the road. They stop to feed their animals, and they realize they still have their money in their sacks. Now they're going to be look like thieves. Now they are afraid. So they come back and they tell all this story to Jacob, and told him that we need to send that he wants us to bring Benjamin back. And look, we have our money. They're going to think we're thieves, and Jacob will have nothing of it. He doesn't want to. He says, I've been bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, because Simeon was the one that was put in jail. So they kept the second son. He didn't keep Reuben. He kept Simeon. And now they want to take Benjamin away. And Reuben tries to make a bold bargain, saying that you can slay my sons if I don't deliver him back to you again. My son shall not go with you, is the statement that Jacob makes. For his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befell him along the way, then you shall bring me down with my gray hairs in sorrow to the grave. So he puts his foot down on this, no. Now we see 43 that the famine will get even more severe, and Jacob's going to have to make a concession. But at this point, everything's fine. He doesn't have to move. We don't know what the time frame is for this. It could have been weeks. We don't know how long it was that Simeon was in prison. I'm sure he was well taken care of. I'm sure he wouldn't put him in prison with all the, he might have actually put him in there to get it, because he was the one that put him in jail. Get a little taste of your own medicine there. But I'm sure that he watched over him, make sure he was well fed, make sure that he was taken care of and wasn't hurt or anything. Again, speculation on my part, but I don't think he would do that. But here we have Jacob putting his foot down, but later on he's going to have to concede. But I really love this story, and when it gets to its climax, when he actually reveals himself, I'm trying not to get ahead of myself, that's the best part. Anyway, that's 41 and 42. Thank you.